Petty bitches wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cunt or built to be fetishized. When I try to tell them, the girls think I'm telling lies. I say it's the bend in my wrist, the paint on my tips, the twist in my walk, my trendy little outfits. I'm Butch Queen, phenomenally. Phenomenal Butch Queen. That's me. Right? Okay. Hey, Deviants, here we are back again with another conversation. We have Micah Marquez and me, Leon. And we're talking about masculinity within our community, Masc for Masc, or masking the mask. I had a lot of fun in researching this episode because when we talk about masculinity, we often attribute it to toxic masculinity, where I found out there is a hierarchy of masculinity with hegemonic masculinity being the most prevalent form.
What the fuck does hegemonic mean?
Well, hegemonic is the form that we might attribute to toxic, but the interesting thing about that, some definitions will even say that to be this kind of man, you have to be straight. It has to do with marriage, and some even people will say it has to do with whiteness. Like that bars gay men, that bars black folks out of another form of humanity and another form of access. So we create these other egos, like we have the hyper masculine or the homo thug, or we have the Adonis, the overly muscled gay man, just to have this access to some kind of manhood, and that gives you access to broader life.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're talking about masculinity being used as currency on a more social level, societal level is what it sounds like you're talking about with hegemonic. And that's something that we as black folks, brown folks, people of color, queer would never be able to obtain anyway.
And it's built like that on purpose. The more people you can keep out of something, the better you can preserve it, the better you can control it. The other form, there's about 5 levels, but the hegemonic being the top, the one that everyone wants to attain, and subordinate. And now subordinate masculinity means it's opposite, it's the exact opposite. And that's where gay people fit in, that's where more effeminate men fit in. I think we also, in this conversation, in this day and age, we have to attribute masculinity, we have to take gender out of masculinity. Women can also be masculine and carry those attributes. There's extensive studies, for some reason, on being a manly man. I think we just value that in the culture, and then to value that in culture means we value that in queer culture where men are mostly sleeping with other men. Like, do you think about the men we desire? I like a little sugar in the tank of my niggas, but I know that's not the case for everyone.
I love a butch queen.
I love a butch queen. Butch queens are us.
Yes. But yeah, I guess as you talk about this, it reminds me, or gives reason and rationale as to why so many queer and gay men try not only to ascribe to these tropes of masculinity, but also are so attracted to it, and also why they put on masculinity so often. Because as you're trying to attract a mate, if this hegemonic thing, although it's unobtainable for us, we're still going to try to get as close to it as possible. Where do we typically derive our ideals, or where did you derive your ideals of masculinity?
I would say from my mom. I think my mom was so hell-bent on raising a man. I think she was self-conscious about doing it by herself. Like, she would, and little did she know, she was teaching me, I feel like having a little bit of masculine and feminine helps you navigate through life, because she would be trying to put on this act, which I don't even think she knew. She only knew how to act like a man from seeing other men. Whereas we would go places, like I remember when it was time to shop for furniture, that's how I learned how to be like, she would just put her little sexy things on and be like, hey, it's my birthday, like using her feminine wiles. And I'd be like, it is not your birthday. But that's how I also learned to navigate things that I'm like, okay, let me get some help, because I've learned that, men respond to femininity, or straight men, and it doesn't matter. Like, you could sneak under that radar, you give a little cunt, and the men will be like, oh, wow, he got me, I missed it. Like, they'll be more, willing to help you out with these things and stuff like that. That's my experience of learning with it. And I think that's the fun in playing with it, because for me, it's not about sexuality, because we all operate in that. Even when like men who are straight find themselves using their girlfriend's lingo, and their girlfriend's lingo is the gay lingo. I feel like it's just a matter of comfortability. Welcome back, Deviants. Here we are for our in-depth conversation with Alfie. Now, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself so I don't miss anything.
Well, I'm Alfie, so a lot of people know me from my social media platform. So just being the father of all Butch Queens and just really paving the way for those who are a little bit different, that like to express themselves through clothes and gender and things of that nature. So, and then coming to you guys all the way from Miami.
Okay, Miami, Delphi, Gunshake State. So we're talking about masculinity in our culture. And you say you're the father of all the Butch Queens.
Yes, I am.
All
That
these
started
bitches
as a
is your
joke.
sons.
It started as a joke, but based off something really serious. It was just that I wasn't afraid to really express myself. You know, despite my story and how things changed, that people just always see me as that person.
Yeah.
So a friend said it, and it just became this joke. And of course, me being me,
Yeah.
I ran with it, not knowing that people looked up to me in that way.
Oh yeah, I love like Butch Queen culture. I feel like it's the year of the Butch Queen for the past few years until we get like a regular year again. Oftentimes when we have discussions about masculinity and in our just day-to-day lives as being queer men, it's starting out as a child just trying to be drilled to be hard and to be this guy. But in talking to you, you have an interesting aspect of that story where you got to be who you were and you had a journey to masculinity.
Yes. So my story is a little bit different. So my mother was a fruit fly, as we all call it in the gay community.
And what does that mean, just in case people don't know?
Gay friends all the time. She would party with, you know, just go out. She was very open to the community. So like I've seen a lot of the things firsthand as a kid before I knew who I was. So growing up and when I came out, my mother was like, okay, you know, I was just waiting for you to tell me.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
So when finding myself and discovering myself, I always leaned more towards like more of a feminine aesthetic. So that's what I loved and that's what I did, and I was never held down for it. So as I got older, body started to change and I started to look like that man.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God, this is something new for me. It's like
And then people start, I guess, reacting to you differently.
yes, people started reacting to me in that because I still leaned it on like more of my comfort zone that was more of a feminine aesthetic with having a more of a masculine body type, you know?
So who comes up to you, like what attention do you attract and what do you think their expectations are?
It depends on where. So if you see me in the gym, obviously I'm giving this trade fantasy. So it's just like people see that and it's like, oh, I want him.
Yeah.
So, you know, let's say if we made it happen, then they learn me and then it's an immediate shutdown. Because it's like now I'm not your ideal guy. I'm not what your standards of masculinity is. Because now you see that I do have like women's apparel or I may have a shoe or the way I style my hair or clothes. So the shutdown is there. But if we go into the party scene or anything like that where people know me aesthetically, it's a little bit more open, a little bit more welcoming.
And
Because it's like, that's the authentic me. So I'm not backtracking.
And I know that you were talking about inter-community, because a lot of times we talk about what happens outside the community to us, about people wanting us to be this and this outside of the queer community. But inside the queer community, they saw the masculine aesthetic and they wanted more of that. They wanted that, like...
So usually when this story is told, it's like, I'm masculine, but I'm learning my femme self.
Yeah.
No. So I've always was that. So like coming into the community, it's just like I felt like I had to learn a different side of me. Because it's like, I don't know what you guys expect from me.
Yeah.
But I know I want a group of friends, you know, so what is this? So it really was a struggle because it's just like, all the recipe is there, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like I'm learning a different side of myself. I look at myself all my life. I don't see what other people see from me. So that was the struggle with that.
Because just like following your online, it gives like superhero, it makes me feel like, oh, you can do anything. It makes me feel like first I see your body and I see the muscles and I see the man part and I'm like, oh, he's being brave by putting on the
That's why
heels.
I never stopped doing it, despite, you know, outwards aesthetic and, you know, looking like a bodybuilder. I never stopped it because that is authentically me.
Yeah.
Putting it on social media, that was a choice. It's just like, if you're gonna know me, you're gonna know all facets.
Yeah.
And then along the way, like you said, I became a hero for others and other queer people.
And that discussion like doesn't really we get to assume, but I think the discussion makes it real and it makes it more like endearing in another sense, because we have these boys who are trying to leave their femme side behind. Maybe they're even scrawnier or maybe they're bigger. They just want to leave
Embrace
that.
it. I say embrace it.
Embrace it.
Love it. When you love that part about yourself and you're not lying to yourself about anything, it's just like, you really see who are true friends. And so just to backtrack, with being more feminine, it's hard to find a friend group. Let's be serious.
Yeah.
So it's just like nobody wants you to show up and be extra. Nobody wants you to show up and be that. But once you embrace yourself and be comfortable with who you are, people have no choice but to accept that.
Now what about dating and heartbreak and love?
So that's like another path. So it's like, I would say as of recently, I'm like, no, if you can't take all of me,
You don't get nothing.
you don't get anything
no soup
at
for
all.
you.
But in my early 20s, I remember, meeting a guy, we're gonna have dinner at my house and just hiding all my stuff away.
Really?
Yes, you wanna hide everything away because you wanna give that ideal, like masculine,
So when
energy
do you-
that the community gives.
When do you come out? Like, when do you be like, is it just like a second coming out?
It's always like another coming out, it's always that conversation, or they find that picture on social media and then you have to explain, but nobody understands, like somebody being non-binary, genderqueer. So relationships are hard in that regard when you're dealing with people that just are not comfortable with themselves or being around you in that. So, and if let's say the relationship continues, you become somebody's secret.
Yeah,
So it
that's the
becomes-
part that sucks.
Yes, so it becomes it's behind doors. So yeah, so that's the hard part about that.
Was there a time where you just went with that, where you're saying like, okay, this is working, even if it's just at night, or if it's
Of
just...
course, because like I tell everybody, you do anything for love. So of course I was secrets for years, But as you get older, it becomes tired. It becomes late. It's like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's like, at this point, I'm 33 years old.
All right, we in the 30s club.
Yeah, right? I think I love myself now, so let me find somebody in this world that loves me for me. You know what I'm saying? Or just as much as I love myself.
And if you found someone who's like, hey, I love this, I do it too.
Yeah.
I want to pump in my heels too. Could that relationship be a thing?
Of course, that relationship. That's like the ideal love story, you
Yeah.
know? Especially in it, like when you're genderqueer. That's like the ideal ride. But that's a little harder to find.
I know, but I can imagine it's harder to find because there's insecurities there. There might be people who want to experiment, but I can see how it feels good, because even like being a little flip-flop burst butch queen, to be able to share stuff with your partner, like even sharing shoes or sharing clothes, it's another level of intimacy and another level of closeness. So I can imagine being like, hey, let's go out and dress up together. I can imagine how that has to feel, because it's like not a safety net, but it's a support.
It is, because you always have that one point person there, you know? But when you don't have somebody with that mindset, they think it's a costume. It's like, you can throw this away, you can take this off, and it's like, no, this is really my identity, this is who I am.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I can imagine, because I am probably guilty of it too, seeing like you just see the outward and you just see the fun with it. So you can like, oh yeah, this is fun, but what are you like in real life, blah, 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 which I hate. And I'm trying to break myself out of too. And I think that's why we have this definition of masculinity. How do you get to play with masculinity?
So that's something I'm still learning, because like, as you can see, it's just like,
You
it's
even masked
it's
today.
there, it's very,
Yeah.
it's what I'm feeling. Like I really don't, I identify with one gender, and I don't give up one for the other. So it's whatever I wake up, what I'm feeling. If it's a pump today, it's gonna be a pump. This is a little button down.
Anywhere.
It's gonna be,
Anywhere.
yes, that's what it's gonna give. But yeah.
All right, I love that. I've definitely learned something. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna go put on I'm not gonna dress up in garb just to say I've done it, but I
should.
feel more free. No, I feel more free to do it. I feel
should,
more free to
yeah.
do it, just because like I think queer support, inter-community is a beautiful thing. And now I'm like, I have a relationship now, and I can do this. And if somebody try to fuck with me, I'm gonna call him to fuck you up.
You got my number.
Okay, it was great talking to you.
great chatting
Thank
to
you
you.
for enlightening us. If people want to reach you, how can they reach you?
You guys can find me on all platforms at OMG is Alfie, and OMG is Alfie officially at Instagram.
All right, deviants. See y'all later for the next conversation.
You know, where media has played a part in narrating masculinity for us, because I know that I tend to steer clear of movies that have way too many guns and it's just hopped up on fighting and then the objectification of women's bodies. I feel like that is really what informed me about masculinity and growing up. Like, it was, you know, the thing that my dad and my brothers, we'd like have to gather around the TV to watch fucking 24, and I'm just like, oh God, this goddamn countdown, please end. But it was just like every episode was this buildup of, and I felt like it was a buildup of testosterone, there was inevitable fighting, and it just added to this narrative in my life where I went to 4 different middle schools and 4 different high schools, right? And everywhere I went, people always wanted to know the same 2 things. Can you fight? And are you fucking? And I saw that in every narrative on media. It was always like, everybody's fighting or fucking. You know, like, women are these objects, and I think about the Transformers movie, and probably in God knows 1 through 90, and the Fast and Furious movies 1 through 110, where they're all the same fucking narratives. Women's bodies are just as objectified as the cars, And then there's just a bunch of shooting, and it's just like, what the fuck? Like, where in here are the representations of men being allotted emotion? Where are women being allotted more than, their bodies?
Because masculinity changes throughout the ages. Once there was, if you carried an umbrella, that was considered feminine. Heels started out as a man's piece of clothing. It changes through the ages. It changes through the ages. And even those things that you attributed to masculinity, by definition, it can be argued that they're not very masculine. Because there are levels, there's a hierarchy.
Yeah.
They might fit into some portion, but violence is not inherently masculine. Strength is something we attribute to men, that we can say, oh, that might be considered masculine, but violence isn't necessarily.
And I would argue that you're right. I just think that the narratives that this society has built up, especially in media, would have folks thinking that. And as I talk about this form of masculinity that's portrayed, it really is what we call toxic masculinity, right? There was a study conducted in 2019 on mental health done by the U.S. Census Bureau, and they found that men in our society are 3.7 times more likely to commit suicide, just a feeling of pressure from society all around them. And then in looking at statistics on rape, we found that 1 in 5 women will be raped. And I just, it leads me to ponder, what are we teaching and how are we socializing our boys to grow up as men in this society if they're feeling the pressure to off themselves, or we're meeting with the opposite sex, there's this notion of rape or not an understanding of no, or, someone else's bodily autonomy.
Yeah, and I even think with, like, when we want to talk really about the attributes of masculinity, when you have a guy who is more femme-presenting but has the balls to go out, I don't know if I could say that, or has the gumption to go out in the world with their heels and walk through the projects and do these things, that can be seen as bravery and going hardcore, and we would attribute that to masculinity, oddly.
Yeah. OBO Jones, good to see you again, man.
Likewise. What's up, man?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us again here at Deviant. Today we're here to talk about masculinity and how we put it on all too often in our community. I remember interviewing you once before, and you talked about how we in our community use masculinity as currency. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So I think for a lot of us, right, like sexuality is this big taboo thing. You don't talk about it, you don't touch it, right? And so it's like, how do I then maintain self while then maintaining privilege, right? And so we think about privilege, we think about whiteness, maleness, masculinity, all those things we attach to privilege. And I think for a lot of us, especially in the queer community, we felt like, how do I maintain privilege? And I think I maintained that with masculinity. So it became my currency. It became how I involve myself with people. It becomes like how we interact, how we grow throughout masculinity, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to get you to go into even more depth with me, if you will. Where does that come from? Like, why masculinity? Why is femininity not a thing that we reach for in our queer community?
Yeah, I think because we've been shunned in so many ways, I think we then try to establish dominance, right? Like, where can I maintain my power? Where can I get my power back, right? And so it's like, for us, it's like, if I'm gonna constantly have my power ripped, taken, dehumanized, belittled, I'm gonna maintain it where I can. And that's with masculine, it's with power dynamics, that's with aggression, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know very particularly, like you and I both being black men, we come from a history of people who have had so much taken from us, right? And so our community has had to learn survival,
For sure.
And I think, masculinity is one of those things that we're taught in our community to put on so heavily as a means of survival. So I guess my question is what is your sort of deeper understanding of that history with the black community and needing to perpetuate masculinity so heavily?
For sure, because I don't even think it's exclusive to queerness, right? We think about how most of us are performative in our masculinity, straight people included. I think we sometimes think we hold the monopoly, but we don't. A lot of us are taught very young that being a black man in general, you better make sure you assert yourself. But not too much because you're gonna scare too many people, but just enough so you can still maintain that power that we're grasping for, that we're trying to maintain throughout slavery or wherever it stems from, right? We're just trying to maintain that power because we need it, you know? And I think it's for a lot of us, we then have to
do what it means to like let go of some of that power and like allow ourselves to be ourselves. Even me now, I don't think that I necessarily interact with femininity more as much as I just allow myself to be me. I'm not caught up in whether or not I'm performing as masculine or feminine. I'm just caught up in being my full self.
I think in masculinity, the virtues that we're trying to perpetuate are like bravery. That's why we fight, or that we believe if we show of self-defense that we are somehow bigger, or like that establishes our dominance. You mentioned these words of dominance, but I guess as we like really kind of pick that apart, how brave must the feminine folks in queer culture be to step out as themselves every day, knowing they're going to be met with ridicule, knowing they're going to be met with violence? Like, what do you have to say to that?
They didn't tell me you were preaching today, but now I know. And so, but I think what's interesting about I did a video on my series just recently, and I was talking about how I have a hard time making feminine or effeminate men passive and small and weak, because how much it takes to be that in public spaces, knowing that you're going to be the target, knowing that it's not comfortable, knowing you're going to be met with, you know, all the things. Because even with me, I'm a gay man just like they're gay men, but I know that when I go into a space, my gayness may not be the first thing you see, so I'm able to maneuver. But if you come in there doing the things, you know it is, and that's ballsy. I don't know if I can say that in this space, but like that's ballsy for you to say, I'm gonna still wear my whatever, I'm gonna do my thing. Y'all gonna either eat it or not, but I'm gonna do me, and that is not somebody to me who is weak or passive. And so it's hard for me to attach that to femininity in a lot of spaces, you know, for sure.
Thank you for saying that. I often find myself in that mind frame of really like taking my hat off to like trans women, to effeminate gay men, because like they're daring to be their full selves regardless of what the rest of the world has to say about them.
And they don't have the luxury of pressing pause, right? Like even in us, like we can be gay at 2:00, straight at 2:15, gay again at 2:30, straight. You know what I mean? Like, because you and I can go, girl, cha, and we can do the things. And I can normal people, I can get very, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But when you are wearing the things and doing things, you can't take it off. So no matter where you go, you're saying, I'm gonna show up in my fullness. And that is ballsy. And that to me takes so much. I literally take my hat off. I'm so in awe of that. I just can't help but respect it. I'm always like, dude, you.
Absolutely. So I know you're not drinking, but cheers to that. Seriously, to those folks in our community that are like being like, you know, really brave. This part of X-Men, I'm such a nerd when I was growing up, right? And so I watched all the X-Men movies, and there's one in particular where they're teenagers, and Magneto was talking to Mystique, the white actress. I cannot remember her name right now, but she was also in Hunger Games. Anyway, he's like, why do you always, you know, go in that form versus your blue form? And she's like, you know, you don't know, you know, she has the ability, so why the fuck not? He asked her a question. He says, have you ever seen a tiger hide its stripes? And she's like, no. At this point, he's picked up the bench press from her, and he, you know, when she answers no, he drops the bench press on her. She immediately turns blue. And in that, he's like, if you're spending half of your time hiding and disguising yourself for other people, you're only spending half your concentration on your actual ability in this life. And it spoke to me as a queer person, and how exhausting it can be to put on masculinity, as you were just talking about. You know, yes, we can hide and disguise ourselves in a straight space, you know, if it's black. Yes, we can hide and disguise ourselves in a gay space if it's white and queer, and we can act like, you know, we're just that homosexual that they're looking for. But what is it to take it all off for a moment, and what opportunity lies in that for us?
I think it's funny when you said that when she went blue to catch the weight, I thought about how much strength it is in your truth. You know what I mean? Like that's where your true power is, when you're being your full self, opposed to when you're being performative or when you're putting on this mask.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do nothing but agree with you. OBO, I know that you are a psychology graduate, as well as a curator. Yes, as well as a curator of Create Space, which is your brand. And also, tell me again about your podcast.
So I did was a series on YouTube, my YouTube channel, and it's called It's Just Not Adding Up. And basically it kind of like was born out of my coming out. I came out on a podcast, and I was talking to her, and I was saying, like, we say we're talking about equality, or we're talking about all these movements that make people feel more comfortable, but it doesn't add up to me because we don't feel more comfortable, right? And I was like, it's just not adding up. How many other things are not adding up? And then it spiraled into 52 episodes of a bunch of microaggressions. And yeah, here we are.
Thank you so much. Yo, I am looking forward to like tuning in to It's Just Not Adding Up. I
Nice.
cannot thank you enough for like offering your thoughts and your psychological expert and life expertise on this
appreciate it.
episode.
Of course.
Thank you, man.
Anytime.
All right, such a pleasure.
I think everything boils down to just let people be. People are gonna do it anyway, but you're gonna cause less harm.
Yeah.
You're gonna cause less harm and less pretending in people. And I think for our culture, Black men have so many parts of our identity stripped away from us. It doesn't matter your sexuality or orientation. We just have had that stripped away from us.
Yeah.
And we need to have those talks amongst each other, gay, straight, whatever. We need to have talks about like, okay, this was a survival thing. This was the thing we needed to do. Now find your identity, find your individuality. I think individuality within our community is a luxury
Yeah.
because we got to fight for everybody, every one of us.
Yeah.
So that's hard.
Yeah. Deviants, we thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode, Masc for Masc. If this conversation interests you or you feel like you have something you want to say on it, we want to hear your voices. Please meet us at deviant.live/play, where you can find this and many more episodes. On there, you can also find a survey where we can get your voices and you can offer us what you have to say about masculinity, the divine feminine, femphobia, all the things related to this topic. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time, Trade.